Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, another lesson. If you're new here, welcome. If you have been here before, welcome back. Call me Teacher Lily. In this channel, I teach you how to speak English and how to write English. As promised before, I'm going to take you through what is tested in paper 1 English, paper 2 English, and paper 3 English. Remember, students in Kenya, that is what they are tested in English language. They do 3 papers, that is paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3. And as I promised, I'll do that. And I'll start with paper 1. What is tested in paper 1? Paper 1 comprises of 3 segments. Number 1 is functional writing, where a candidate is supposed to answer the question as given in form of a functional writing. It can be a formal letter, it can be an informal letter, it can be recipe, it can be email, it can be internal memo, it can be minutes, it can be short reports or investigative report. Name them, everything you have read about writings. So a candidate is expected to answer the question as asked, and the examiner will mark it in the following. There are marks for format, the format, how a candidate has written. Has the candidate been able to write the right format? If it is a friendly letter, has the candidate used one address, a complete date? Writing the date in full, not slash or dash, in full. 21st December 2021. Write it in full. Has the candidate been able to write the salutation, dear, if it is a friendly letter, dear Jane, dear John, okay? And the body, and the conclusion, and the signing off. Your friend, and your name, no signature. That is the format, the structure. So there are marks for the format. There are marks for the content. The content is, has the student been able to answer the question as asked? If the question talks about write a letter to your friend informing him or her about the new school. Maybe you have been transferred to a new school. So in the content, have you told the candidate of what was in your previous school and what is now in your present school? Have you been able to understand the question? That is the content. There are marks for the content. And finally, there is language. Have you been able to write in the correct spelling? Have you been able to use the right tense? Have you been able to construct your sentences, the sentence structure? Okay, so that is what is tested in functional writing. Question 1. Have the right format. There are marks for that. Content, meaning have you understood the question? And lastly, the language. Are you able to express yourself in English? And that is why I said, for you to speak English, you must first think in English so that you can speak it or even write it. So that is question 1. Go back to your books. Every detail that you have been taught in writing, from Form 1, shopping list, packing lists, personal journal, all that, go back to it and revise. And be sure that question 1 will be functional writing. We go to question 2, which is a cloze test. A cloze test comprises of 10 gaps where a candidate is supposed to fill in with an appropriate word. The cloze test is mostly extracted from magazine, newspapers, books. You can be tested even with the book that you're reading, the class books. So a candidate is expected to answer those gaps with the 8 parts of speech. You know them. So the guidelines to a cloze test is read and read and read. Read a lot of materials and equip yourself with knowledge. Then in that cloze test, you should be careful to see where the gaps come in. If the gap is after a full stop, a candidate is expected that the answer she will give should begin with a capital letter. The tense. Which tense is the closest in, so that you can know which tense to use in case you're supposed to use a verb. The other thing in a closest is every gap should be filled with one word. Do not write two words slash. It's only one word for one gap. So you're supposed to have 10 words. That is for closest. Number 3 is oral skills. Under oral skills in paper 1, you can be tested using an oral poem or an oral song. You can also be given an oral narrative, and questions are extracted from that oral narrative. For example, if it is an oral poem, the common questions are the sound patterns. Do you know which are these sound patterns? The sound patterns are alliteration, assonance, and consonants. Go back to your books and revise on those. Then the other thing is rhyme scheme. Is also under sound patterns, the rhyme scheme. Commonly asked questions. If you are to say line this and this in this poem, how would you say it? If you are to recite line this and this in the poem, how would you recite it? The examiner expects you to write the verbal and the non-verbal cues. The non-verbal cues, remember, they include the gestures, the facial expression, and the body movements. And when you're answering this question on non-verbal cues, don't write, I will use appropriate gesture. That is not an answer. The examiner expects you, if you're talking about facial expression, don't say I will use the appropriate facial expressions. Which are these expressions that are on your face? You can talk about folding your front part of this part. Okay? You can talk of opening your eyes wide if you're surprised or something. So the examiner expects you to mention that exact action that is happening on your face. If it is about gestures, I'll stretch my hand forward and beckon the person. If it is a poem that talks about feelings, and there is a part that is talking about the love of my life, for example, I would point a finger on my chest showing the love of my life. There's a common poem that talks about you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You are my sunshine. If it is non-verbal cues, you'll point at the audience talking about you are. I'll point a finger to my audience when saying the line, you are my sunshine. So be specific on the non-verbal cues that you'll use. Do not write, use appropriate gestures. Mention the exact gesture. Use appropriate facial expression. Mention that exact facial expression. Maybe smile wide, yeah, saying a certain line. So non-verbal cues. That is more non-verbal cues. Verbal cues talks about the pronunciation of words, the articulation of words, the audibility when reciting the poem. Okay? So go back to your notes and revise more on non-verbal and verbal cues when answering such questions. Then you can be given a short form, a riddle. Give the steps in a riddling session. Do you remember those in Form 1? You can be asked the steps, the 6 steps, and you should write them as they are, the 6 steps in a riddling session. You can also be asked about, you can be given a proverb and you are asked which audience is appropriate, or a riddle, you know, a tongue twister. That is in section 3, the oral skills. That is paper 1. Okay? You can be given a dialogue where you're supposed to fill in gaps in a dialogue. Identify the register. Is the dialogue in a hospital? Is the dialogue in a church? Is the dialogue in a market? There is a language in a market that an examiner expects you to use. There is that language in a church. There is that language in a hospital. So if it is greetings, there's that way you should respond. There's a way you should respond to a certain form of greeting. So do you know these things? That is what you're supposed to do in paper 1. So as you're revising for paper 1, go back to those things that I've mentioned and make sure that they are on your fingertips. It's not much, it's out of 60. So it's a paper that you can score the highest because you have everything with you. So as you revise, and I believe that those who are watching me have a notebook and a pen, and you have written what I have told you, go back to your books, carry those notes to school. You can inquire more from your teacher of English. So with that, it's thank you, and thank you for watching. Stay tuned for lesson 2, where I'll talk about what is tested in paper 2 and paper 3. So as you continue to celebrate Christmas, don't forget that exam is almost here. So as you're celebrating, also remember to read. When you go back to school in January, February, March, you have started your exam. So don't forget that, celebrate, knowing that the exam is around the corner.